The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
So there's this Supreme Court case going on involving that Colorado cake baker who a few years ago refused to bake a gay, or I believe it might have been a lesbian wedding cake. It was a gay cake, yep. Okay. I mean, obviously I'm kidding, by the way, when I call it a gay cake or a lesbian cake, but I'm sort of being satirical and playing into the absurdity of the entire story. Anyway, Colorado baker refuses to bake a gay wedding cake. And now this is being heard by the Supreme Court. Now, this topic came up in a recent Sarah Huckabee Sanders White House press briefing. Of course, Trump's press secretary, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, speaks for the president, represents the president's views on a variety of different issues. She was asked, does Donald Trump believe it's okay for businesses to hang signs that say, we do not serve gay people? And she said that yes, as far as the president is concerned, that type of sign, no gays served here, would be included under religious freedom as something that businesses should be allowed to do. Here's a clip from Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
The lawyer from the Solicitor General's office for the administration said today in court, in the Supreme Court, that it would be legal, it would be possible for a baker to put a sign in his window saying, quote, we don't bake cakes for gay weddings. Does the president agree that that would be okay?
The president certainly supports religious liberty, and that's something that he talked about during the campaign, has since upheld since taking office. And I believe that would include that.
And one other question.
I believe that would include that, meaning I believe that that religious liberty would include hanging a sign in your business that says no gays allowed. By supporting that, Donald Trump supports something that is actually not that rare on the right, the idea that there are multiple classes of people and that it's okay to say, hey, this is a class of people that is just not allowed in my business. And think about the obscene nature of the Trump agenda taken at large and that of the supporters of his who absolutely love this position from Sarah Huckabee Sanders and from Trump. More than a dozen women accuse Donald Trump of sexual assault. Even a 13-year-old girl says Donald Trump raped me when I was 13. They elect him president. 6 or more women, I can't even keep track of the number at this point, accuse Republican Senate candidate Roy Moore of sexually assaulting them. And Donald Trump endorses the guy, and his supporters say, yes, vote for Roy Moore. Someone wants a gay wedding cake and says that being denied one is discrimination. Now, all of a sudden, we've gone too far, and signs saying we don't serve gays are okay. And the key issue is that in states where sexual orientation is a protected class, like religion, like race, a we don't serve gays sign is legally the same as a we don't serve Christians sign or a we don't serve blacks sign, legally speaking, right? And I get it. Some people on the right will say, no, no, David, it's totally different because you choose to be gay, but you are born black. And that's a silly argument in two ways. Number one, it's silly because you choose your religion, right? And number two, it's silly because if they are all protected classes in the eyes of the law, there is no difference. But that's the problem. These people don't care about the law. If the law coincides with their worldview, then they point to the law as a defense of their worldview. When the law conflicts with their desires, they say the law is a problem, it's impinging on my religious freedom, and it must be changed, or at minimum, we should be allowed to ignore the law based on our so-called sincerely held religious beliefs. And in fact, there's an example of this as applied to race. Mormons used to believe that black people were actually inferior. Mormons did not allow black people to hold, I don't even remember what positions it is, but certain positions within the Mormon church. Would that religious belief have made a no blacks allowed sign at a Mormon-owned business acceptable? Because, hey, after all, it's their sincerely held religious beliefs. In the eyes of the law, I think the answer is, of course, that would not have been allowed. And there are people, Pat, who emailed me saying, David, I actually don't care about this because when I see a sign like that, I'll know not to give my business to that store. That's totally fine, right? I get it. If you see a sign that says no gays allowed and you disagree with that, then you say, I'm not going to do business. I'm going to effectively boycott that business. That's fine, but that doesn't change the legality of this issue.
Right. Or, I mean, what if there's not another bakery in your town and you
Sure.
have to travel super far to get your cake? Or what if it's something that's not as frivolous as a cake and it's an essential service?
We are going way, way, way backwards here with this. And after a few steps forward on the LGBT rights issue over the last several years, certainly with the Supreme Court decision saying you can't ban same-sex marriage in any state at the state level, we still have multiple states, a couple dozen states where you can be fired, roughly a couple dozen. You can still be fired for your perceived or actual sexual orientation. And this, as the official position of the presidency, right? The official position of the presidency is that there is no problem with a no gays allowed sign in a business. We're going backwards.
Yeah, and Trump had the audacity to wave an LGBT flag. Now he wants to ban transgender individuals from serving in the military.
Yeah.
This now, I mean, that's just absurd.
And when we heard, remember, that both Hillary and Trump, neither one of them was going to go after LGBT rights. There were people saying there's really no difference between Trump and Hillary on LGBT rights. Oh, wow, how much of a difference we are seeing right now. Send me your thoughts. I'm on Twitter at @DPacman. The show is on Twitter at David Pacman Show. Tremendous program coming up for you today.
The David Pacman Show at davidpacman.com. The David Pacman Show at davidpacman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Jonathan Senda. Jonathan, thank you so much for being a David Pacman Show member. Membership confers endless great member benefits, including access to the bonus show in both audio and video formats, as well as a commercial-free stream of the program available in your choice of audio and video. Sign up at davidpacman.com/membership or also access the bonus show and other member benefits by pledging at patreon.com/David Pacman Show. Let's get to the phones at 617-830-4750. We're going to go first to a caller from the 813 area code. Caller from 813, tell us who you are and what's on your mind today.
Hello,
813,
David.
you're on with us.
Hey, I had a kind of a EU question to break it up out of American politics for a while.
Okay.
Have you heard about what's going on in Poland right now? They're having a far-right, party rise up right now. Of course, it's called the Law and Order Party.
Yeah, of course. I have been reading about that.
But, of course, when you have far-right politics come, you're going to have neo-Nazis come with it. I know they're trying to have, 30,000 migrants move there. The EU's trying to push that on Poland. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about it, and I'm thinking if the EU is pushing one of their countries with migrants when they're having this far-right kind of rise up, I think that might backfire on them because it might just, embolden them more. Not to mention, those 30,000 migrants, you're kind of just putting them in harm's way as well. I was just wondering what you thought about that.
Yeah, it becomes difficult in these situations because on the one hand, you don't want to show that you're changing your policy because of these extremist elements in a country. But at the same time, I think the argument of putting the immigrants themselves in harm's way is a real concern. So I don't know how you handle it because you also don't, if you say, hey, you know what? Because of the uprising of these anti-immigrant right-wing groups, we're no longer going to send these immigrants to Poland. They see it as a victory and they will become emboldened to protest even more, right? They'll say, hey, we can prevent immigrants from coming to our country just by showing up and demonstrating. So I think that's a real tough one. I mean, do you see a solution to that?
Well, I don't know if I just mentioned it, but they're going to try and put economic sanctions on them, which I think is going to be even worse because they're like, oh, you're going to do that? Well, you, we're just going to get even stronger. And I mean, Jesus Christ, the Brexit was close, but you want to talk about a Pexit or whatever the hell it's going to call?
Yeah.
It's going to be 80-20 or something.
Yeah, it's a tough situation, but of course, I think that bottom line, my instinct would be not to give in to the legislative desires or policy desires of the neo-Nazi right-wing extremist types. I would do whatever is possible not to give in to what it is that they want.
Yeah, it's just Poland with its history, I think, is so much more difficult to handle, whereas, the UK is a little different because it barely really won the vote.
I told a
It's
story
really-
not
it's
that
really
long ago,
scary
actually,
over
about
there.
when my dad was in Poland and some crazy anti-Semitic stuff that he experienced. But story for another
Yeah.
day. If I will someday retell it. Thanks for the call. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
All right. Let's stick with the phones at 617-830-4750. Next caller will be from the 407 area code. Caller from 407, introduce yourself. Tell us what your question is as well.
Hello. My name is Jovan. People call me Jojo.
All right.
Yeah. I was just wondering, well, I had a weird conspiracy theory about this entire, like, the
Hold
state
on one
of the
second.
world.
I can't
basically.
hear a word that Jojo is saying. Is
I
he
heard
turned?
conspiracy theories.
Is
That's
he
about
turned?
it.
Can we turn him up somehow?
little
I don't
bit,
know
yeah.
if we can. Try to speak up if you can, Jojo, because I'm having a real hard time hearing you.
Okay. Sorry, it's just my phone's one of those crack phones. It's kind of stupid. Anyways, I had a weird conspiracy about this entire thing.
Okay.
Okay. Let's say, yes, Trump is helping the Russians, but not knowing so. But while the Russians know that he's helping them, they're trying to help Korea. And while they know they're trying to help Trump, because he's arguing to his right base, who pretty much have grievances with a large part of the world, black people, Jewish people, which are all over the world. So he's going to do things that aggravate those kind of things to gain popularity. Meanwhile, Russia, what was it, Arabic area, and I believe Asia go together, meet together for world peace, but, or, peace offering, but technically under the guise of a peace offering. But technically, it's a way to start a war, rebuild from the ashes, and make the entire world be ruled under it. Yeah, that's kind of crazy, but it feels
I
like
agree.
something dictators be,
Yeah, I wouldn't even be.
About.
I'm not even sure I fully understand that one, so I don't know that I'd be able to comment. I mean, Pat, is there?
We may need a long form investigation on this one.
Yeah, we might have to call in Noah Ferguson to really look into that one and give us 30 minutes unpacking it. Jojo, I couldn't possibly comment on it, but it's very interesting that you're thinking about it, and I'm wondering what other theories you might have, because that's definitely an interesting one. I appreciate the call very, very much. 617-830-4750 is the number. We're going to go to our next caller from the 682 area code. Caller from 682. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Colby in Austin, Texas.
Okay, and let's turn Colby up as much as we can. I can barely hear him. Yeah, go ahead, Colby.
Okay, sorry about that. So basically, you've mentioned in the past that you're concerned about zoos and even aquariums because of the animal welfare issue. And I know you're aware of the deforestation and dead zones and stuff caused by animal agriculture. So basically, I was wondering what's holding you back from cutting out animal products more from your life?
Oh, I've already reduced animal products pretty significantly. I mean, I could never, it would not even enter my mind to consider veganism, but I could very easily be vegetarian. But I reduced my meat consumption significantly. I basically don't eat red meat maybe twice a year or something like that at this point. And I'm definitely, much more in the direction of the Mediterranean diet for sure.
Right. Would you at least accept a little bit of inconsistency in being against zoos for animal welfare issues, but still supporting eating chickens and fish and stuff like that?
No, not really. I mean, I don't. I'm getting nutrition from the food that I'm eating. I don't get any nutrition from going to a zoo.
Right. Okay. That's cool.
All right. Very
right,
good.
thanks.
Well, glad we were able to very quickly get to the bottom of that one. 617.
I didn't put him up to it.
617-8. The vegan producer Pat did not set that call up. 617-830-4750. We're going to go to our next caller from the 718 area code. Caller from 718. Who's this?
Hi, my name is Ben Zhao from Queens, New York.
Great. What's going on?
So we have seen Trump make these unhinged attacks towards North Korea, and I was wondering, is Trump's narcissism the biggest threat to national security?
Is Trump's narcissism the biggest threat to national security? In some way, I mean, if we want to really try to compartmentalize it, in some way, yes, right? Because what's a threat to national security? destroying alliances with allies is a threat to national security. Is it Trump's narcissism that made him share secrets that we got from our ally Israel with Russians in the Oval Office? To some degree, Trump probably wanted to come off as the guy who, I'm a big boy and they tell me really secret stuff, right? So it is narcissism in that way. With North Korea, Donald Trump believes that he is the strongest and most powerful, and that's how he wants to appear. And he believes that he is better at figuring situations out than anybody else. So that narcissism could make it so that he makes really bad decisions with North Korea. I mean, I think it's always difficult to boil down. The biggest threat is something as simple as narcissism. But when it comes to Trump's personality, I think that there's a lot to narcissism as sort of like the root of what could make a lot of bad decisions take place.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you never really know until they react. Right? I mean, if he comes out with all this bombast and narcissism and makes all these claims and statements, right? And he's trying to threaten these foreign countries and they just back down, then
we say that he won. Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, I think you're onto something, which is that as a personality trait, I think one of the things that when it comes to foreign policy made President Obama a very sober arbiter was that he did not seem to have that sort of pathological narcissism that pervades every interpretation by Donald Trump of what's going on around the world. So I think you're probably onto something there.
All right.
All right.
I'm
Very
getting
good.
it.
Thank you. Appreciate it. 617-830-4750 is the number. We're going to go to next to our caller from the 330 area code. Caller from 330, introduce yourself.
Hi, David. My name is Rob, calling from Akron, Ohio.
Awesome, Rob. What's going on?
Not much. I wanted to ask what your thoughts are in terms of how we discuss fiscal spending in America, because it seems to me the more I listen to Stephanie Kelton and the more I buy into monetary theory, and I get the understanding that if the country is truly a sovereign issuer of currency, that we don't necessarily have any real limits on what we can do in spending in terms of the federal level. It seems to me when politicians get into, we can't afford this, we can't afford that, we'd have to raise taxes here, we have to raise taxes there, that they're being a little disingenuous if we are indeed a sovereign issuer of currency that don't have to limit ourselves on the federal level. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I've been reading a lot about modern monetary theory. Earlier this week, we actually interviewed economist Pavlina Cherneva, who's very knowledgeable on that issue, and Stephanie Kelton, who you mentioned, is scheduled to be on with us in the next couple of weeks. So we're taking that issue seriously. And yes, I mean, you're right, which is aside from, so you can believe modern monetary theory or not believe that it accurately describes sort of the relationship to the creation of currency by governments. But what's clear is that our elected officials are completely disingenuous when it comes to the use of the debt as a reason not to do things, and then ignoring debt when they want to do something like provide tax cuts to the very rich. And to say disingenuous, it's both disingenuous and there's probably some level of incompetence as well. I would never say it's only disingenuity when incompetence is also there. But yeah, I think there's a lot to what you're saying, and you'll probably like our interview with Stephanie coming up.
Yeah, I think I will like it. And I just find it really ironic that Trump, of all people, as incompetent as he can be, actually broached this subject completely by accident, maybe about a year ago now, when he says something along the lines of, we can spend what we want because we print the money. I mean, it's a bit more complex than that, but through complete accident, it seems like he was like the most accurate on the subject, which just kind of makes me laugh out loud,
and
Trump is the last person that knows anything about fiscal policy.
It was completely by accident. That we can be absolutely sure of.
No, I think Trump was ahead of his time on this one.
Really?
Yes.
Trump's knowledgeable about modern monetary theory. That's a good one. Yeah, great points, Rob. Good topic, and we're gonna talk about that coming up.
Sounds good. I look forward to the interview with Stephanie. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much for the call. Appreciate it. Let's go to our next caller. We're taking calls at 617-830-4750. We are going to go next to the 847 area code. Caller from 847. Hope you can hear me. Tell us your name, where you're calling from, and what's on your mind today.
Hi, my name is Steve. I'm calling from Illinois.
Awesome. What's going on?
My question is basically about Trump Russia. So intelligence experts and experts on the subject almost universally agree that Putin is attacking our democracy. His first line of attack was to attack our political system, specifically the executive branch. Those same intelligence experts are now almost universally in agreement that he'll attack again. Obviously, he'll have to be more covert about it since the public's aware of his intentions now. I know that you're not a counterintelligence expert, but what do you think the next line of attack will be in 2018 or 2020? Do you think Putin will focus more on our media and information systems, or since he's obviously decided to align himself with the Republican Party for now, do you think he'll focus more on trying to discredit liberal Congress people, public figures, or intellectuals, or will he go after something completely different that I'm not thinking of?
Well, it's not that your thinking is wrong. I think you're thinking more at the micro level, whereas I believe that the success that has been, remember, if you go back to the Foundations of Geopolitics, this book from the 1990s by, I forget the author's name, but I've mentioned the book before. It points to a priority of basically destabilizing the big Western democracies, in particular the United States, in order to better the position of Russia geopolitically. So you're thinking at the micro level, like what about discrediting congressmen or whoever, this, that, or the other. I think that the fact that Donald Trump has been elected and has been such an embarrassment on the international stage, that will allow states like Russia to wreak havoc in completely new ways that we're not even considering of big picture, right? Because the fact that Trump will be president, more than likely, when the midterms take place in 2018, that in and of itself is a systemic shift in the United States. So I don't know that we really can even guess, although I do believe that the cyber warfare component should not be understated.
Right. I have a quick follow-up question, if that's okay.
Sure.
So if Mueller concludes and announces that Trump conspired with a foreign dictatorship to cheat his way into office, essentially, would any right-wing nutjobs who persist in trying to discredit Mueller and spread information about this subject, would they essentially be guilty of treason, if not in a legal sense of the word, then at least in a colloquial sense of the word treason, as in betraying our country or democracy?
Nah, they'd be guilty of being idiots, I think, more than anything else. I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, guilty of treason in a colloquial sense? Not really. I mean, I think most of them genuinely believe the nonsense that they parrot. So I think treason gives them too much credit as having a clue. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I gotcha.
All right, thanks for the call. Really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, David.
All right,
Bye-bye.
take care. Our phone number, when you want to call in, is 617-830-4750. I think we've got time really for probably just one more call. Okay. And that call is going to be from the 516 area code. Caller from 516, tell us your name and what your question is. Oh, first, nobody there. 516 is not there. I'll try one more.
We're gonna have to make time for another call, I guess.
I know, yeah. We're gonna end up running out of time. Let's try 443. We're gonna try from the 443 area code. Who would be our last caller? 443. Who's this?
This is Donovan Peterson.
What's going on, Donovan?
Not much. It's really great to be on the show. And I just had a question about whether you could give us a brief explanation about Michael Flynn's involvement with Russia and how significant that involvement is when it comes to his proximity to Trump.
Well, I mean, we've been talking about this really for months, and we just had the indictment very recently. So, I mean, generally speaking, at this point, what we are being told by the defenders of Trump in light of the Flynn indictment is that Flynn was acting completely on his own. Nobody knew what he was doing. Nobody directed him to do anything, etc. It increasingly is a storyline that's falling apart. We now have emails from KT McFarland, who was a Trump transition advisor, emailing numerous other people about the meetings that Michael Flynn had planned or already had with Russians, including the Russian ambassador Sergei Kislyak. We know that Reince Priebus and Sean Spicer and many others were on those email chains. We know about Donald Trump Jr.'s involvement. He had to answer questions behind closed doors in front of a Senate committee this week. So I don't think we know the full scope of it yet, but the absolutist line that Flynn was acting in a complete vacuum, almost reminiscent of Seinfeld's Bubble Boy, completely isolated from everything, that at least we know not to be true, although we can't yet say how far it goes.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. Thank you for that explanation.
All right, no problem. Donovan, thank you. Very, very good to hear from you. And that is going to do it for calls this week. We will take a break. and be back after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Today's classic interview is with an individual who went by the name Jackie Keaton when we interviewed him, and it relates to net neutrality. This was an interview with a former Time Warner Cable representative. You know how cable companies, internet companies are known for like the worst customer service? I think it's car dealerships, ISPs, and airlines or something that are always some of the worst rated in terms of customer service. Well, we interviewed a former Time Warner Cable rep who told us about all of the tactics that they would use to continually raise your bill rather than lower it. And it's an interview that relates to net neutrality, not insofar as customer service reps actually connect to internet freedom, but whenever we hear these ISPs tell us we would never do anything to just try to get more money out of everybody, like creating internet slow lanes and fast lanes. You need only look at their sales and retention practices as outlined to us by Jackie Keaton back in October of 2014 to realize the second that these companies are allowed to do internet fast lanes and slow lanes, they are going to do them. Let's check out my interview with Jackie Keaton. I'm joined today by a former Time Warner Cable retention agent. We have agreed that he will go by the name Jackie Keaton. Of course, protecting his identity is important to both Jackie and to us. So Jackie, really great to talk to you. Let's start at the very beginning. When you say a retentions agent, what does that mean? You know, people are probably used to calling Time Warner or Comcast when they have the very common problems people seem to have with their bills and service. What is retention?
Retention is actually a team that's put in place to ensure that you don't disconnect your services or that you don't downgrade your services. If you want to leave the company before you can even start to get that rolling, you have to deal with retention.
And this is pretty common. I mean, in my experience, when I talk to my cell phone provider or even a credit card that I want to cancel, rarely is whoever you initially talk to actually empowered to cancel that account. And in my experience, and tell me if this is good or bad advice, when I'm calling specifically because of a problem with my bill or I want to negotiate a better rate, I just I go directly to retentions, whether that's by saying to the phone tree that I want to cancel my account or just finding the retentions number. Is this a good strategy? In other words, are consumers going to save themselves some time by going directly to a retentions agent?
Well, it is true that there are deals that are offered by retention that aren't offered by any other departments. It isn't necessarily true that you'll get to retention if you say you're going to disconnect. Gotcha.
Okay, so we'll go through the process with Time Warner. So when you got a call, at what point in the process were those customers? Had they already spoken to a regular customer service agent and had indicated they want to cancel?
Almost always. These people have been on the line for sometimes upwards of 2 hours.
Okay, so you get someone, your phone rings, you take the call, maybe they've been on the phone for 2 hours. Are you able to see how long total the person has been on the phone? You know, sometimes you get transferred around 5, 6, 7 times. Do you know what the transfer history and total call length has been?
Absolutely not. A lot of the time, another agent will just put them on hold and say they'll be right back and they'll be transferred to you. So when you greet them, they're like, what? I was just talking to someone else.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the training process. When you were brought in, what were you told was ultimately the goal of what your job was there to do, what was there to accomplish? Were you there to help people sort out their bills? Were you there simply to prevent people from canceling at all costs? How was your position described?
The position is described as you're put in place to help the customer realize the value of their product so they won't cancel.
Gotcha. And what tools and techniques were the ones that you were told you should be using to prevent people from canceling?
De-escalation mainly. These people are usually pretty upset when they get through to us. It's de-escalation, restating the value, offering more services for a shorter amount of time for a lower rate.
Okay. And was there ever really a specific situation where you were told, listen, if someone calls with this scenario, you don't have to try to upsell them or retain them. If someone calls because they're, I don't know, they're the person who had the account died, for example, do you just say, okay, we'll disconnect for you?
If they're actually dead, they have to take a death certificate in to the local payment center, so we can't actually do that over the line. If they're sick or something, though, you can absolutely upsell.
And was that what you were told to do? So if someone calls in and they say, you know, my husband's just really ill, and either for financial or other reasons, we just don't really want or need this anymore, you were still told in that case, offer them more expensive stuff.
Right.
And how does that work? Tell us a little bit about that.
You'd say, you first empathize. Say, I can understand how that would be hard. Listen, is he going to be laid up for a while? What kind of things does he like to watch on TV? Maybe we can add this NBA sports pass or something like that.
And were there, what would you say was the, well, I'll ask it two ways. What was your success rate in terms of the calls you got in getting people to ultimately not cancel? And was there an expected or target success rate that was established? In other words, what were the metrics that were put in place?
The metrics are put in place for how much money you're actually saving. A lot of the time, you can actually get a pay raise by saving the company money by preventing these people from disconnecting. But if you were to slip below that rating, you'd actually just go back to your initial flat pay rate. My actual rate of save, I'm not sure what I'd say. Probably, it was pretty high, maybe like 70%.
So in other words, that means that of every 10 calls, you could save 70%, or 7 of those people, you could prevent them from canceling.
Right, because a lot of people, they do call in because they're frustrated about prices. If you can work with them, a lot of the time they do stay with the company, just if you're willing to work with them.
What was the turnover rate? In other words, the people that worked in this retention department, was it a position in which people would stay for a while? Were people just constantly coming in and out? And why were they leaving?
Constantly in and out. Everyone was leaving just because of the actual environment. It's really hard for people to stay positive in a place where everyone is so negative that you're talking to on the phone.
Yeah, I mean, it would seem to me that it would just become not only an incredibly repetitive situation, but also you're like you said, you're dealing with people who are angry all the time. I imagine that gets to you.
It absolutely did, yeah.
So I've been having, as I've talked about on the program, an issue with Time Warner here in New York City, where I think it's been 17 phone calls just trying to get the price and package that I was initially promised 13 months ago when I moved to New York City. It's almost become kind of like a game where I just wonder, what are they going to tell me next? And every time I'll reference the story up until that point to kind of get us both on, on kind of equal footing. Is there any accountability? Like, does anyone care what anyone else has said to me?
No, no. I'm sorry. The promises that are made, we were supposed to never throw anyone under the bus, never say, no, they lied to you. What we're supposed to say is, let me look into that. And I don't think that's something we can actually do, but let me see what I can do for you.
I've heard that many, many times. So, and ultimately, oftentimes I'll be told, okay, listen, David, we've got this sorted out. I apologize for the trouble you've had. What we set up is that your next bill will be this amount, and that's what it will be for the next 9 months. And then I get my next bill, and it's $30 more. In those cases, was the last agent I spoke to, were they just straight up lying to me to get me off of the phone? Did they believe that they had put in place the price I was given, and through some other mechanism it didn't happen? Or what exactly is going on behind the scenes there?
It's funny you should ask that way, because it could be that they didn't do it because there's no accountability. It could be that they tried to do it, but the software wouldn't let it go through. Or it could be that they tried to save you money, but the company actually wouldn't approve the credit.
So sometimes somebody might actually put in and say, we are going to give this customer this credit. And then at some point after we get off the phone, but before my next bill comes in, someone who's higher up than the phone agent said, oh, no, we're not going to be doing this.
Exactly.
And then they're under no obligation, or at least decide they're not even going to communicate that to the customer, I would guess.
No, and they don't tell the agents either. So we have no idea.
That's just incredible. Hey, last thing I want to ask you about. You talked a little bit about how, depending on how many of these accounts that people want to cancel, how many of them you're saving, that there's kind of like a variable pay or bonus structure. So how does that work? Is that a significant proportion of someone's base salary? In other words, can your salary really change drastically based on how many people you're convincing not to cancel?
Absolutely not. No, at most it's a $2 thing, and that goes by every 2 weeks, depending on how well you're doing. It's nothing that you could strive for, if you know what I mean.
Understood. Okay, and then how about as far as what tends to happen to everybody, which is you get one price for 6 months, and then it goes up, and then it goes up, and that entire kind of the billing creep that takes place. What's the best way to prevent that, or at least to counteract it?
It would be to keep in touch with them. One thing that is the reason that that's sort of justified in the company anyway is because you don't actually have a contract like these other companies. So you can call in and adjust rates. It's not, I mean, it's obviously not the best practice to keep changing the rates. I'm not trying to defend that, but you are able to negotiate with them.
All right, so it seems that is, it's almost like you just need to set a calendar reminder every 3 months. You should be calling up to negotiate.
I can't say whether or not that's true.
All right, we've been speaking with Jackie Keaton, former Time Warner Cable retentions agent. Jackie, thanks for being with us.
Absolutely, thanks for having me, David.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
All right, let's get into audience questions for the week. Of course, you can send them in however you want. Email, voicemail, Twitter, Reddit, whatever you want. Today's first question is via voicemail. The voicemail number is 219-2DavidP.
Hey, David, I wanted to ask you about the Laffer curve. I hear a lot of people on the left often lampoon the idea of the Laffer curve because it seems to be associated with Reaganomics, and the extent to which that it is, I can understand this kind of criticism, but I just want to hear from you in theory why the idea is not sound, because my understanding of it is that at a 0% tax rate, the government will take in $0 in revenue, obviously. At a 100% tax rate, the government will take in 0% revenue because it will completely destroy any kind of productivity. So to my mind, the Laffer curve says, correct me if I'm wrong, is that there's just a number somewhere in between 0 and 100 that's optimal. Obviously, people on the right will tend to say that that's a lower number and use this idea as a justification to reduce tax rates. But I don't understand why, in theory, liberals could very easily apply the Laffer curve too and say the ideal tax rate is actually higher. So I don't understand why the Laffer curve is kind of always associated with the political right in this country, when it seems to me that it's sort of a neutral thing that either side could use, and it seems like sort of a common sense idea. So I'd like to hear your take on this. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah. So listen, the right uses the Laffer curve because they like to come up with just really simple ways of doing politics. Like they've been really successful by saying, hey, taxes are bad because it's your money. You've earned it and you should get to keep it. So taxes should be really low. Or abortion is bad because you're killing a kid. That's it. And they really like these simple ideas. So the Laffer curve has been used almost exclusively by the right to justify cutting taxes. You're right. It could hypothetically be used by the left, but it's not, because the left tends to take a more nuanced view on this, and I'll explain what I mean. So yes, the Laffer curve is the idea that given some tax rate between 0% and 100%, there is some optimal number. But more importantly, and this is where the right tends to use it, they often like to argue that a reduction in the tax rate can lead to an increase in government revenue. That basically the idea would be if you sometimes lower the tax rate, typically that's what the right wants to do, you will generate more total revenue by more people working because the tax rate on their income is lower and because there will be more money floating around for economic growth. Here are the problems with the Laffer curve. Number one, it's usually used to justify a reduction in taxes when actually an increase in taxes would be better for the economy. So the Laffer curve is constantly misused by the right. But the most important thing is that the tax rate that the Laffer curve is referring to is like an overall rate or an average rate of some kind. And as we know, we have a progressive tax system. So the impact that a change in the tax rate is going to have on government revenue is going to be very different based on who is getting the tax increase or the tax decrease. You could have a decrease or an increase to the average tax rate in a way that would be stimulative to the economy or not. If you decrease taxes by reducing the tax rate only on the richest Americans, your economic benefit is going to be far smaller than if you lower the average tax rate by giving money back to middle class Americans, because middle class Americans need the extra money for their daily lives, whereas the very rich are just going to save that money, which is not very economically stimulative. So that's why the right Pat likes to oversimplify a lot of issues. And they say, hey, the Laffer curve tells us you lower taxes, revenue goes up. The average tax rate that the Laffer curve deals with does not actually tell us anything about what would happen to the economy. Which tax bracket are you talking about?
Yeah, this is what Republicans are trying to argue now, right, with their tax plan.
Yes.
That, even though revenues will go down, we'll make up for it because there'll be so much more economic productivity.
Indeed.
But then you have independent agencies analyzing it, and they predict maybe a tenth of the economic output that Republicans are predicting.
That's exactly right. And you could have, this is not, what people I think don't understand is, we're not making an argument for or against raising or lowering taxes on any particular tax bracket in this segment. What I'm telling you is that the Laffer curve is effectively useless if we're talking about the average tax rate, because we have a progressive tax system in the US with brackets, and it's almost always misused by the right just to justify lowering taxes all the time, which is exactly what they want to do. So yes, Laffer curve, it's interesting. It's not particularly useful to us in thinking about what it is we need to do with tax policy.
Yeah, I love it. 0 to 100%, somewhere in the middle of there, but it tells us nothing about where the top of that parabola is. Like, where does it max out?
And not to mention what the brackets should be and at what income limits you go from being in one bracket to the other, which are really the most important thing. So it's interesting to know about the Laffer curve. I don't know how much it's going to teach you about what taxes should be. Pamela wrote in, should it be easier to qualify for presidential debates in order to encourage more diversity of ideas and breaking the two-party duopoly? I think the answer is yes. Right now, the requirements for being in the national debates are that you need to be on the ballot in enough states to get 270 electoral votes, which would get you the presidency, and you need to be polling an average of 15% in some number of recent major polls. I think that that's just too restrictive. And those are the rules that the Republican and Democratic parties have agreed to because they want to keep other people out of the major debates. That's the whole point. It is a system designed by the two major parties to keep control in the hands of the two major parties. So I think that the threshold needs to be lower than 15%. I don't know exactly what it should be. There are people who say it should be 2%. The problem with 2% is you might end up with 14 people on the stage. And that is not going to be productive within our system. Now, I will say that if we had a different voting system, if we had instant runoff voting, for example, I think that the case for allowing people into debates with even lower thresholds is a stronger one. But I'm kind of mixing two different political issues here. What do you think?
Hard
I
to
think
pick a number, right? You got to pinpoint, you got to cut people off at some point.
Yes.
5% maybe? Does that sound about right to you?
That's what I'm thinking, yeah. That's exactly what I'm thinking.
Total affront to our democracy, too, that the Republican and Democratic parties are running these debates. It used to be in the hands of the League of Women Voters, and that at least seemed independent, right?
Yeah, and the Federal Elections Commission is just basically they take direction from Republicans and Democrats. So I think that there's a couple different things that are going to allow us to break the two-party duopoly if we ever are going to. You've got to bring down the threshold from 15%. I think being on the ballot in enough states to win is perfectly reasonable, because if you're not on the ballot in enough states to win, why are we listening to you in a national presidential debate?
You ever see in like the primary races or like statewide races, if there's a candidate that really doesn't have much of a chance, they'll give them less time?
Yes, of course.
You think in the presidential setting that would be adequate or that would make sense?
That's always tough, right? I mean, when you go to the 17-person Republican primary debate and you have some people who are polling 1%, Should they get as much time as everybody else? It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because part of the reason that they will never get beyond 1% is nobody asks them questions. But at the same time, should you spend even amounts of time when there are 3 or 4 clear frontrunners? I opt for more fairness and more democracy. If the candidates that are already doing better are doing better because they're better candidates, they should be able to portray themselves as the strongest candidates with the same amount of time as the other candidates. So I'm in favor of giving the candidates on the stage equal time. You can decide, you can debate how you get on the stage, but I think if you're on the stage, you should absolutely get equal time. Ian wrote in, hey, David, lots of people go out of their way to appear smart in social situations, which I actually don't think is something smart people do. Is there something people do in social situations that actually makes you think they're smart? Yeah, this is an interesting question. I've never met really smart people who deliberately try to make themselves appear to be super smart. In fact, it's usually the opposite. And what I mean is the following. If you're really, really smart, in my experience in social situations, you do way more asking of questions than you do talking about your credentials or intelligence or accomplishments. Smart people that I've met tend to be very comfortable saying, I don't know enough about what you're talking about to give you my opinion. Whereas the people who are not so smart but really want to seem that way are very quick to give you whatever they believe their expert opinion is on absolutely any issue. I think that actually recognizing that you don't know things and being comfortable in social situations to say that that's not your area of expertise, you'd like to learn more, that to me signals that you actually are a more intelligent person.
Ignorance is intelligence. It's like 1984 over here.
Ignorance is not bliss, but rather it is intelligence. No, and again, it's not ignorant. I mean, I get what you're saying, but
it's just attractive to say that I don't know much about this issue, right?
It's attractive.
I think it's, well, it's like, it's intellectually curious at the very least.
I think it
draws people to you in that way.
It's at least honest, for sure. If someone is capable of abstract or hypothetical or rhetorical thinking when talking about something, that to me signals intelligence, which interestingly enough, have you noticed that Donald Trump is not able to think abstractly? He's not able to speak abstractly. He is only able to speak in these short verb-noun type sentences.
Well, he can say, I am like a smart person.
Yes.
I went to one of the best schools in the country, got terrific grades.
I am like, comma, a smart person is how he likes to say it. The other thing that to me translates intelligence is when someone is able to explain a concept to somebody else, particularly someone who might be clueless about a topic. If you are able to take something that you know a lot about and have really advanced knowledge about, particularly if it's something that's a complex issue, and you're able to talk to someone who has no knowledge of that, and you're able to come up with a way of explaining it that the person with no knowledge understands it, or at least has an opportunity to understand it, I think that that's a skill that really intelligent people have, which is very interesting because the people that want to often appear smart, they will try to explain things in the most complex way because they think that makes them seem really intelligent. Wow, I didn't understand a word you said. You must be really, really smart. The actual smart person will realize that they need to be able to explain it more clearly.
Or it just shows maybe that they have poor interpersonal skills, perhaps.
Oh,
I mean,
sure,
you know,
that
you
could
can ramble on with your superior vocabulary and your in-depth knowledge of the topic, right?
Not going to make for a very comfortable conversation for anybody.
Probably not.
Yeah.
And if you've noticed, our best interview guests have been those who have been able to boil down complex topics into something that our audience can understand.
Some of the worst interviews, and I'm not going to name any names, have been interviews where the topic could be really interesting, but the person is not able to talk about the subject matter in a way that has broader appeal and is inclusive and in a sense is actually exclusive. Some of my thoughts. Send me your thoughts. What are things that actual smart people do in social situations that you come away thinking, wow, that's a really, really smart person? We've got a great bonus show for you today, davidpakman.com/membership to get access, patreon.com/davidpakmanshow to get access, and free 2018 calendars on our website, davidpakman.com/calendar18.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.